Thanks, Arlen. Thank you all for being here. We're going to go ahead and get started. I'll introduce myself in just a moment, but want to get the ball rolling with some of our content and what we're going to expect today. So like Arlen mentioned, today we're going to be talking about connecting schools to community partners and how to do that sustainably and successfully. Okay. So really quickly, here's our agenda for today, just so you all know what to expect, what we'll be going through today. We'll start with some introduction. I'll introduce Act Now to you all, what our organization does and who we are. I'll introduce myself, and then we'll jump into it and we will talk about funding and some opportunities in after school with that. And then we'll move into the benefits of partnerships and then spell out for you all how to create a lasting, sustainable, healthy community partnership in the after school and out of school time space. To start us off, I'm going to drop a link to a Menti in the chat. This is just a bit of an introductory, so I can know who all is in the room, you all can know who all is in the room, and we can introduce ourselves. So the link to the Menti is in the chat, and the first one should be open, and I'm going to share my screen to show you all. I first just want to ask you all what your role is in your day-to-day. Are you a school district administrator? Are you a school principal, a teacher, an after-school provider, or something else? And if you are filling out that other category, I would love for you to drop in the chat really quickly what that position is if you haven't done so already. I know a few of you did. We have a leadership coach in the room with us today. We have a couple teachers. Let's see, who else do we have? A lot of community and family liaisons, which is super exciting. So important to have those in our communities. We have some teachers. Awesome. I'm going to keep it up for just another second for any folks who didn't get a chance to complete that yet. I'm going to drop the link to the Menti in the chat again for you all. We have a high school teacher, SEL interventionist. Great. Awesome. So it looks like we have a pretty well-rounded group of expertise in the room today, which is super exciting. I highly encourage you all to utilize the chat throughout the presentation and share your thoughts and experiences with each other. It's going to be super interactive, and I really do enjoy when we have an opportunity to have these conversations with each other. So throughout the presentation, if there's anything you want to add or anything that comes to mind, I highly encourage you to just drop it in the chat. That's why we wanted to have a meeting instead of a webinar, but that will be available for you. I'm going to move us along to the next slide, which is just a level setting question for me, is what are you hoping to get out of today's presentation? What are your goals for yourself? And this is going to be open-ended, so you can type your response however you see fit. I'll give you all a few moments to do that. And again, if you don't feel comfortable doing it on Menti, you can always drop that in the chat as well. Or if you don't want to type, you can also feel free to come off mute. That's always an option as well. Okay, we have some answers in the chat. Someone said, my goal is to learn the best practices when communicating with community partners. Someone else said how best to connect with our families and providing needed and valuable programming. Someone said ideas for creating partnerships up on the Menti. Building better partnerships with my community to better help families in my program. Amazing. Best practices and networking tips. Okay, this is an interesting one. This is my first year teaching in a community that I didn't grow up in, and I want to better connect with that community, with my community. My goal is to glean additional strategies in engaging our families. begin a dialogue with others and building connections, best practices to share with local school leaders. Great. These are wonderful. Please continue to populate the chat with your answers. The Menti will stay open for a little bit if you want to answer there as well. Great. Okay, I'm going to move us back to our slide deck, but again, feel free to keep populating all of that. I appreciate you all engaging with me there. Okay, so just for you all to get a clearer idea of sort of what this specific presentation will glean into a bit, we'll talk about funding. Hopefully by the end of this, you will understand or have a better understanding of how some of the funding available in the state is distributed statewide and to whom. We'll talk about some needs assessment things, how to create one, what are best practices in that, how to find some data points and measurements, things like that. We'll talk about how to identify potential partners in your community and how to make sure that those partners align with your own organization or your school. We'll talk about some outreach strategies as well and offer you a template for that as well, if that would be helpful. And then finally talk about Act Now, like how we can help you all in this work and what we can offer. So for those of you who may not be aware or who are attending a training with Act Now for the first time, Act Now stands for After School for Children and Teens Now, and we are a statewide after-school coalition. There's actually a counterpart to us in all 50 states, which makes up the 50-state after-school network, and so we all do similar work. And Act Now works to ensure that there's access to high-quality, affordable programs for youth after school and during out-of-school time. We do this in a number of ways that include advocating at the local, state, and federal levels, by connecting various stakeholders together, by developing and facilitating professional development opportunities like this webinar today, by working to increase the quality of after-school programs across the state, and also by offering technical assistance and compliance monitoring to various state agency grantees. I know that was a lot, so if you have any questions about what we do, feel free to drop them in the chat or ask me, and I'm happy to elaborate a little bit. And now that I've been talking at you for quite a bit, I'll introduce myself. My name is Nikki Gillani. I use she, her pronouns. I'm the after school resources and support specialist for school partnerships at Act Now. So much of my role is dedicated to connecting schools and school districts to community-based organizations to establish partnerships in the out-of-school time field. Okay. Before we get into it, I wanted to level set quickly with just a quote for you all. Feel free to take a second to read it, but I really want you all to look at this and sort of hone in on this as we run through today's presentation. This is sort of going to set the tone for us and what we're going to be talking about and learning about a bit today. I'll leave this up for a few more seconds before I move us along. Okay. Awesome. Okay, let's get into it. We're going to talk a bit about funding to start off. I really want to focus on COVID relief funding today because we're coming up on some deadlines for that, and I think it's the most practical method of funding after school programs and in your out of school time programs that we have currently. So I want to talk a bit about how it was disseminated across the state and what that means for you all. So the Illinois State Board of Education, or ISB, was granted by the federal government almost $8 billion for Illinois schools to combat learning loss following the COVID-19 pandemic. 90% of the dollars that the Illinois State Board of Education received was disseminated directly to school districts to use to mitigate learning loss, however that meant for them. In ARP funding, which is ESSER 3 or the last round of funding, 20% of that funding is supposed to be used on learning recovery. And after school was determined an allowable use for ESSER 3 funding. So that's that sort of first piece. The remaining 10% was kept by ISB to address various needs across the state. So ISB is working on 4 different projects. And so one of those is high impact tutoring. And so they're creating academic hubs and support across the state for high impact tutoring. They're focusing on community schools as well. And they launched the Community Partnerships Grant, which upheld the 4 pillars of the community schools model. And that's how they went. They invested that money. They're also funding bridge programs, which are programs that focus on the transition years in school. So students transitioning from kindergarten to 1st grade or from middle school to high school, things like that. And then they'll also be using some of their COVID relief funding to work on their assessment process. So in addition to those pieces, ISB was also given certain funding that the federal government said needed to be spent on learning loss, summer enrichment, and after school. And so instead of doing another competitive grant opportunity for this, ISB decided to distribute that money to school districts again, based on an evidence-based funding formula. So that was distributed based on, the percentage of low-income students that are served by the school. So some school districts received more, some received less, some didn't receive anything. But if you are interested in the list of those schools, I can send that to you. But essentially what this slide means for us is that there's a lot of investment or a lot of opportunity for investment in after school right now, because we have money that's specifically dedicated to be invested in these programs. Additionally, COVID relief funding is not as stringent as other grant opportunities. It doesn't have any deliverables. It doesn't have any benchmarks that you have to meet. It doesn't have any evaluation processes. And so it's very much an opportunity for you to invest quickly where you think you'll make the highest impact. There are obviously, of course, other funding sources that are available to help fund after school and out of school time programs as well. Some of the most notable are on the screen here. Teen Reach is an after school or out of school time program that is funded through the Department of Human Services. It's a 3-year-long grant, and we're coming up on a new competition in FY24. So that's something exciting to look forward to. If you're looking for some funding for after school, highly encourage you to go for Teen Reach. ISB also has an after school programs grant, and annually they are allotted $20 million to disseminate for after school programs funding. About $17 million from that 20 million pot is reserved for school districts to apply to. So if you work in a school district and you're looking for additional funding to help support your after school program, that is a great place to go. We are expecting a new competition coming up soon in the fall. CCAP, of course, is always an opportunity for you all. RPSA, or Reimagining Public Safety Act, is another grant program funded through the Department of Human Services. There are actually different priority areas. So there's like a youth development grant, there's a violence prevention grant, there's a few other ones as well. And so you can look specifically into the interventions that you are interested in and apply for those directly. And then R3 is another annual grant. It's only a 1-year grant. But that is a great funding source as well if you're looking to fund some services and some programs after school. If you need any additional information on any of these, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to send you some additional resources, or we can sit down and talk through if you would be eligible for that. Okay. Now that we know how we can fund our programs, I want to talk a bit about what the benefits are of partnering with an established organization. So there are 4 major benefits that I always like to call out. They're written on the slide, but I'm just going to dive in a bit deeper into each of these. So the first of these is infrastructure. By partnering with an organization or an agency who already does the work that you're interested in, you avoid needing to create something new and stretch your, I'm assuming, already limited capacity. Partners within your community are already experts in this work, right? They're already experts in delivering services. They already have the connections built with their families. They probably grew up in these communities. They have worked with other community members. They're already working with the youth that you're serving. The list goes on and on and on. And they do all of this in a high quality way. So these organizations, they've already established relationships with these families, with the families that they serve, with the community that they serve. And so they have the trust of the community, which is invaluable in a service space. So by partnering with these entities, you can keep that strong infrastructure, and you can also add to it by offering that additional capacity that you all have coming into this partnership. And you also avoid the risk that you ensue when you're starting something new. You know this is something that already works. You know that this is something that's already viable. So you're not going into this with the risk of it falling apart, essentially. The second benefit here is community building. So collaborating with folks from within your community creates a stronger commitment to the success of your youth. Without a stake in the success of these young people, community members don't have any obligation to contribute to the growth or the positive development of their community, right? But by partnering with these entities, you create that stake in success. You create that stake in student achievement, and you conjure up a greater commitment to providing services that meet the needs of those being served. So with partners, you're building strong relationships within your community that drive success in the work that's being done. The third is related to competition. So partnerships reduce the amount of competition in your area. And I'll give you an example to sort of to illustrate this a bit better. So if, for example, in your community, there are already 4 after-school programs that are up and running. And then 5 of the schools in your area choose to use their ESSER funding to create their own new programs. That makes 9 after-school programs in your community alone, which creates competition for staff, for space, for resources, for students, for funding. The list, again, goes on and on and on. But by partnering, referring back to the piece on infrastructure, you're building capacity and you're increasing those opportunities rather than competing for students to serve, to meet numbers or things like that. You have an opportunity to together serve a greater amount of youth. You can share spaces, you can share resources, you potentially have more staff. So it sort of reduces all of that competition altogether. The last piece here is sustainability. Partnerships can help programs continue to run past the 2024 deadline that ESSER holds. So if you're funding your program completely through ESSER funding runs out, or the sort of liquidation date is in 2025 in January. And so if on January 25th, you have to have all of your funds liquidated, on January 26th, 2025, where are these students going to go for programming, right? But if you build collaboration with your partners, they again already have that infrastructure. And so you have opportunities to sustain programming past that ESSER deadline. Benefit to starting after school program is creating greater access to quality programming for youth. I use this number in a lot of my presentations, but I'll explain it a little bit more. America After 3 p.m. is an initiative created by the After School Alliance to capture data regarding the current state of after school at both the statewide and the national level. So that report in 2022 found that for every one youth or every one student in an after school program in Illinois, 4 are waiting to get in one. I did the math. I figured out how many school-aged youth are currently in Illinois. So using that number, using that ratio, we find that almost 700,000 youth are still waiting to be served in Illinois alone. And so by partnering with an existing entity, we can offer more services to a wider community and expand our programmatic efforts. Again, we're not reinventing the wheel when we're partnering. We're simply expanding the scope of services, and we're offering services more equitably. And that's another benefit that you get from partnering. Some more benefits. I can talk about the benefits of after school all day long. I think it's so important. But I'll run through these a little bit quickly. So by providing additional time after school for tutoring or for additional homework help, students will make larger gains in their academic achievement. It's been proven, it's been shown. The report is linked at the end of this presentation for you all. But even more than that, we see benefits in academic behavior, such as greater attendance levels, less disruptions during class time, greater homework completion. We see less discipline rates, things like that. Talking about safety, having an after-school program available ensures that children have a safe space to be while their families and guardians might be at work or have other responsibilities. This way, families are more able to sustain themselves without the fear of having to maybe sacrifice one thing for another. Student mental health is another huge plus point here. Students can be connected to mentors. They can be connected to mental health professionals and counselors in after school that will help them build those healthy relationships. And in addition to that, a lot of the priorities of after school rely on social emotional learning and social emotional needs. And so you're continuing to work and build on those skills through different mediums in after school. And finally, many community organizations offer programming that's available to families and the community at large as well, not only just the youth that they're serving through these programs. And so we see like English as a second language learning classes, we see clothing drives, food drives, resume building workshops, community gardens, technology classes, cooking classes. Again, the list goes on and on and on because it's dependent on what your community needs. But we see that after school doesn't only benefit our youth, but it benefits the community at large. These are just some examples of some of those benefits. We see that this is taken again from the After School Alliance report, but this report was pulled from results from 1,400 program providers across 48 states. And so this was specifically regarding the role of after school and COVID learning and recovery. So if we're talking about leveraging our ESSER dollars to work on learning recovery and mitigating learning loss as it's intended to, we see that after school is a proven method to do this effectively and in a really high quality way. Again, these are just some of those points that we can bring up. Okay, now we're gonna really get into the nitty gritty here. The next sequence of slides will sort of run through the steps that you should take in order to establish a community partnership for your school or for your after school program. This is quickly just sort of a timeline for you to see what we're gonna run through. It also moves in the order that we're gonna be moving in today and the order you should be moving in as you do this work. So the first essential step that you would need to take is to find out what the most pressing needs are for your community and for your students. The most effective way to do this would be to create a needs assessment of your community or the group that you're intending to serve. A needs assessment will evaluate the current status of your target group and will review what needs exist and how they're currently being addressed. You want this to be really, really comprehensive. And since your services will most likely include community and family involvement, you should also make sure that you're including some community data in your assessment as well. Demographic data should look like the racial and ethnic build of your community, to be aware of any cultural values and importance of your youth and the community being served. Another important demographic point to consider is socioeconomic status, employment status, single parent households, any educational attainment levels, things like that. Primary language is also a good one to include, because all of these are indicators of need, right? Employment levels show a need for like resume building workshops, for example. A high rate of single parent households indicates the need for maybe additional childcare assistance. Primary language indicates maybe a need for English as a second language learning classes, things like that. So I highly recommend, if you're in the Chicagoland area or in cities around Chicago, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning is a great resource, or CMAP, but the census is always a great database to use as well. Any university databases that you can have access to are great for collecting some demographic data too. Talking about school data, include any information that you can gather about extracurricular activities that are available to students, because you don't want to duplicate those. The safety rating in your school, the school day curriculum. That way you can create a balance or a relevance between the school day learning and after school learning, and you can get an idea of what activities you can bring in that aren't already being offered. Student academic attainment and academic behavior data is probably one of the best or most important indicators of need that you can get in this space. This should include like performance on standardized tests, homework completion, absenteeism, ESL students, mobility rates, et cetera, et cetera. I can talk about this forever. It's really important in indicating need, because then you can identify how you're going to intervene in those areas. And then finally, your needs assessment should include a section that mentions what the existing gaps are for your students, despite any ongoing interventions. So what you're already doing, and is it working or not? And the clearest way to do that is to use a gap analysis, which I'll show you on the next slide. This is a very quick and easy example of what a gap analysis can look like. It doesn't need to be something super fancy, but something that really highlights for you what is the need that you've identified for your community, what's already being done, and where do we still need to put in the work to really get there and meet that need. This example is linked at the end of the slide deck, so if you need access to it, that's available. Okay, that was a lot of me talking. I'm going to launch another Menti. It's the same link, but I just want to ask you all just to think a little bit through what needs you can identify or are off the top of your head for your community and your youth. So what are the most pressing needs for your youth and your community? And I'll share my screen as well so you can see folks' answers. But as we're thinking through this, what's something that comes to mind for your specific community? And again, you can feel free to come off mute. You can feel free to drop it in the chat, whatever feels good for you. Okay, So we have someone said free after school tutoring for our students and also after school sports programs. Engaging parent participation and affordable options for all households. Great. Anything else folks are thinking about? Thinking about what your families and students have been going through post-pandemic, thinking about any SEL or mental health needs. Maybe transportation is a need for your community, right? Like my students can't attend programming because they don't have a safe way to get there. Maybe that's an issue. Maybe technological literacy or bandwidth. We have no junior high or high school band program at the school. Offering this would be a good activity. Great. Family engagement as a need. We have some resources for that if you're interested. Any other academic needs that we're seeing? I've talked with some folks who have said that some students are having a hard time with their handwriting, and that is a need that they're looking at. I've had some folks say that because a lot of assignments are online now, that some folks have students that just don't complete their homework assignments anymore. I don't know if you all are feeling that as well. Definitely. Emily says definitely. Transportation home and for after school. Handwriting is a huge problem. Okay. That thank you for letting me know that that's a real thing and I didn't just make it up. Bridges, transitional programming, mental health resources. Programming resources for families, homework assistance, safe places for upperclassmen in high school to get food, to live and get food, etc. when needed. Yeah, absolutely. Looks like a lot of the folks on the call are looking for a safe space for folks, looking for a third space for students to be at, outside of school, outside of home. Great. Feel free to keep populating the chat with that if you need to, but I'm going to move us back to our slide deck. Again, super appreciative of you engaging with me in that Menti. Okay. So now that we've got our needs identified, right? We know what we need. We know what we want to start providing for our students. The next thing we got to do is find our potential partners, right? So we want to list our organizations. This organization or this program should reflect the culture and the values of your students. No interventions will be effective if students aren't motivated to participate in them, right? And students will be more likely and more willing to participate in programming if it's relevant to them, if they can connect to it in some way. So we want to make sure that we see that our students can feel represented in the programming that we're offering and in the people that are offering those services. I also always highly encourage to try to include organizations that offer family events as well. At after school programs, program staff only engage with students and with youth for 3 to 4 hours at a time. The rest of their day is their own. And if the values and the concepts that are being taught in program are not being reflected in their daily lives as well, they won't be as effective. And so including family and community engagement will create that opportunity to blend those lines and bring shared values to not only programming, but to the household as well. I would also consider location when you're thinking about finding some partners. Think about, is this going to be a standalone site? Are they moving from space to space? Are they willing to come in and provide programming? What does transportation look like? Things like that. And then also think about prioritization, right? All needs won't be met by one program. And so that creates a need to prioritize and compromise. assessing what needs are most urgent or what needs can be met most quickly should be an important step during this process as well. While we're talking about our partners and figuring out who those could be, I also think it's really important for us to think about what type of partnership we want to establish. So a full-time partner will essentially take over the implementation of your entire out-of-school time or after-school program. A good example of this is the 21st Century Community Learning Centers. 21st Century providers do the entire implementation of the after-school program, but the program is housed in the school facility. So that's an example of a full-time partner. And that, as mentioned earlier, takes away the need to create an entirely new program and hire entirely new staff. A collaborator would contribute to your after-school program by servicing like maybe a few times a week on a particular topic like dance or technology or STEM, whatever. And the extent of your partnership can be discussed and created between you and your organization, which we'll talk about a bit more in the upcoming slides. But we want to think about, what do we want this partnership to look like? Do we want to sort of outsource our programming, or do we want to have programming initiated by our own entity and then bring someone else in as maybe vendors of some sort? So once we've identified sort of what type of partner we want to look at what options do we have available. And a helpful tool to use in your search for partners is ActNow's Map and Database. The map and database is linked to the slide. So when you receive access to the slide deck, you can just click on the slide and it'll take you directly to the map. But this map is a tool available for use on our website, and it is essentially a database of all out-of-school time programs statewide. So it's a great resource to identify partners in your area because you can search it based on like location and things like that. But map entries include information about like the number of youth served by the program, the ages that those programs serve, the services that are provided, things like that. So you can filter based on specifically what you're looking for. Additionally, our map just received some updates and now has overlays that include racial and ethnic data, educational attainment data, housing data, and poverty data. And so it's very comprehensive as well. So if you're looking for some sort of tool to find a baseline of what your community looks like, highly recommend the map and database for you all to use. Okay, our third step here is interest, right? So after compiling your list of organizations and your programs that you can potentially work with, you want to ensure that your youth will actually be interested in those programs and those services. And then you can filter that list of partners accordingly. Interest in the programs will, again, create higher potential for participation and retention in the program, not only by students, but by families as well. Surveys are super duper helpful for this because they clearly identify where interests lie. And so this enables your youth to have a voice in programming and allows them to feel connected to the programming, but it also allows them to be a part of the development of the collaboration as well. And they feel they feel an empowerment there, right? And it will also give a clear indication to school administrators of what youth will be excited to be involved in and what they will be excited to participate in. You should also push to collaborate with organizations that share a similar mission to yours, because having a shared mission with your community partner will be beneficial as it's something both parties can sort of fall back on when you're making decisions about like the path of programming and implementation strategies and things like that. And so having a shared mission will help ensure that you have like similar goals and visions for the programming overall. And although surveys are incredibly helpful, it's often really hard to get some adequate participation from folks. So these are just a few strategies you can use to push for some greater participation. I think using class time is always really effective. So whether it's like you say it in the morning announcements or you use it as an exit ticket, that's a great way. Incentives always work great. Like you can get 5 more minutes of recess if everyone fills out this survey. You could do a raffle if you really wanted. I always used to do paper surveys. So during pickup time, I'd always run out to cars and like give surveys with pens and like have people do it in real time. That can get annoying, but that's how I got most of my survey responses when I was working in direct service. And also like constant reminders, email blasts, using the Remind app, maybe sending it as homework for your students. Like, okay, your homework today is to remind your parent or caregiver to fill out this survey. Just a few examples of what can be done. Okay, so at this point, you should have like your carefully curated list of the community organizations that you think would be a great fit for your students and what you envision your program to be. So now you should begin your outreach to organizations. I will say you want to be sure that you can completely and fully understand where your students' needs lie before you begin your outreach. You need to know how to explain those needs to someone forwards and backwards and in your sleep, like the back of your hand. Because at this point, you are your students' advocates, and you are the only people that can tell decision makers what they need and what they want. And so you want to be sure that you're advocating for what they actually need instead of what like could be a cool addition to the school or what you would like. So you want to make sure that you really know what their needs are. And when you send that email or when you make that phone call, you want to make it a personable conversation, right? You want to let this organization know who you are. You want to let them know how this specific organization can address what you need. And you want to personalize it so that that organization knows you've picked them specifically, right? Like you did all of this research and I pick you. Make them feel special, woo them a little bit. And also make sure that it is an open invitation to communication and collaboration instead of like a one-sided request. You want to make sure that it feels very open-ended, but also like an opportunity for you both to have a conversation about this, not I'm demanding this partnership. It makes folks feel a little bit more inclined to work with you that way. I linked an outreach template to the end of this PowerPoint. So when you get access, again, you'll have access to all of the outreach templates as well. Okay, and then sort of the last piece here is your partnership agreement. So your partnership agreement will be created by your point person and the point person of the organization that you intend to create a partnership with. During this process, you can discuss the terms of the agreement, the length of the relationship, whose responsibilities lie where. But you want to make sure that that discussion and that document is absolutely exhaustive. You want to make sure that you address anything and everything that you could think of or that might come up during that partnership period. So you have it written down. What do we do in this case? What is the expectation if this happens? So thinking about like the duration of the partnership, the extent of the involvement of each party, staffing expectations, space expectations, your goals of the partnership, the intended outcomes, how will you evaluate success, expectations, responsibilities. It's also typically helpful to have an incentive included in this document as well, something that will incentivize both parties to sort of uphold this agreement. Okay. This is super exciting for us. We just launched a Creating an After-School Partnerships Toolkit, which sort of has this information and a ton more in maybe a much more digestible format because you can read it sort of at your own pace. But this is sort of a how-to document of how to establish a high quality after school partnership. Accessible not only by after school programs, but also by school day folks, community, like local business partners and things like that. Anyone essentially who wants to create an after school partnership can utilize this toolkit and learn how to do it. So I sort of broke it down into 4 phases of partnerships. And we sort of talked about them today as well, but we see the identification phase, the building phase, implementation phase, and sustainability phase. So it runs through how you can do all of these things. It has a ton of resources available. Amazing, thanks, Cheryl. It has all of the amazing resources that we have and a ton more. And it has a lot of templates. It has a needs assessment template, an asset mapping template, outreach template, a memorandum of understanding template. Because folks are always asking me for templates, so I created them and put them in one spot for you all. It is brand spanking new, just launched on our website last week, so you're like some of the first to see it. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. Additionally, at the end of this toolkit are some testimonial narratives from folks who have established partnerships in the out-of-school time space. We have a community partner narrative and also a school district narrative. So you can sort of get both pieces of it, but I always think it's really powerful to hear from your peers and see what they know and what their methods were. So you know, like you're sort of not alone and things like that. But that is available for you. If you need or want a paper copy, we have printed, binded copies. So if you're looking for that, reach out to me and I can send out a few copies to you. Of course, free of charge. We do everything for free here. But yeah, let me know if you need anything, paper copy. Okay. So how can ActNow help you in this work? We are here to help you however it makes sense for you. These are just a few of the options you have, but again, we can cater our services to whatever you need and whatever you're looking for. I really love creating needs assessments. And so if you're like, I don't really know where to start or how to really do this, feel free to set up a time with me and we can go through that together and create a needs assessment and know sort of where your community lies. It's also almost my entire job to find partners for you. So if you're like, here's what I need, here's what I'm looking for, I need a partner to do this, let me know. And I'm happy to send a list of some folks that might be good potential partners for you and help set up that communication as well, make those introductions. That's like almost my entire job. So I'm happy to do that. Making connections to partners, again, introductions, I'm here for that. And any ongoing networking and training. We have trainings going on all the time. You can look at our calendar on our website and you can see sort of what we have up the wagon. And if there's anything that you're looking for that you haven't seen yet, that you're like, I need some resources here, reach out to us and let us know. We're happy to point you in the right direction or even create some materials for you all, because that's a large portion of the work that we do. We're dedicated to serving you however it makes sense. And again, all of our resources, all of our professional development opportunities, all of our consultations are all free of charge. So anything you're looking for, let us know. We're more than happy to help you. These are the resources I mentioned earlier. They're all linked here in one spot, so you can just grab and go if you need it. And I will leave it open for questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat. Feel free to come off mute if you need to, but that was all that I had for you all today. Thank you for being here. I'm really, really happy to have you all in the room with me today. And yeah, thank you so much. There was one question before I sort of leave us out of here. Okay, Teresa, I will get to your question in a second, actually, but I'll let folks hop off if they need to. Thank you again. Thank you for being here.
All right, Nikki, thank you so much. Much appreciated all the strategies for connecting with community partnerships that you shared, all the after-school activities that are available. Now's the time to, yes, put your thank yous for Nikki in the chat. If you have questions, put them in the chat, or as Nikki said, this is a meeting, so you are free to come off of mute and ask your question on the microphone. So we've got a little time left here. We'll just pause and just hold for any questions that you might have, or comments or feedback.
Quickly, Teresa had dropped a question in the chat earlier that I didn't get to, but she asked to explain what CCAP, RPSA, and R3 stand for. CCAP is the Child Care Assistance Program that is granted through the Department of Human Services. It is an opportunity to help parent pay and help parents and families pay for childcare for programs that offer parent pay-based programs. RPSA stands for Reimagining Public Safety Act. That was a bipartisan legislation that was passed into law last year, I believe, and the Department of Human Services grants different grant opportunities and after school and out of school time opportunities through that act. And then R3 stands for Reinvest, Renew, and something else. I forgot the other R, but it's 3 R's, something reinvest and renew. And that is an annual grant cycle that, again, is 1 year long, and you can reapply in the competition annually.
Excellent. Thank you for getting back to that question. I missed that one as well.
No worries.
Let's see if there's anything else in the chat. Did you see Cheryl's would love a list of programs for after school tutoring? Oh, sure. Cheryl, I'm going to drop my email in the chat actually, and you can email me and we can talk about that. Great. All right, well, I don't see anything else in chat. And of course, you're always welcome to come off of mute to ask your question or comment. As I said, this is being recorded. I'll be sending out the recording link and the evaluation. Whenever that's all ready, I'm going to be traveling a little bit tomorrow. So hopefully tomorrow afternoon, I'll have some time to get those items out to everyone who registered for today and everyone who attended. We appreciate you so much. We really appreciate our partnership with Act Now and Nikki and the team. So look for more webinars and professional learning in the future from us. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording.